City of Stevens Point Sustainability Commission meeting, recorded January 21st, 2025.
Welcome everyone to the first Stevens Point Sustainability Commission meeting. I'll do a roll call. Sam Lang is absent. Allison Burr.
Here.
Heather Phelps.
Here.
Gregory. Here. Robert.
Here.
Doug.
Here.
Everyone else is present, so thank you all very much for joining us. This is meant to be a very introductory meeting. Just kind of get to know each other, go over some of the rules that you will be required to follow as a codified body of the City of Stevens Point, go over the goals that are set forth in the ordinance. Does everybody have a copy of the ordinance that created this body? Let's pass it out just for giggles. It's available on the Stevens Point website too. If you go under ordinances, we are chapter 3.57. So the agenda is short. I'd like us to have an introduction so everybody gets to know everybody. We do have to elect a chair and a secretary. The secretary will be, of course, taking the minutes and be responsible for working with staff to create the minutes. The chair will run the meeting as per Robert's Rules of Order, and then the framework and goals that are set forth in the ordinance. Pretty straightforward because, again, it's set forth in an ordinance. And then a discussion on future meeting dates. The reason we say that is because you have to decide what works best for all of you. It sounds like everything came on board relatively easily today, with the caveat being after 5:30. So you will discuss amongst yourselves a regular meeting date. The goal is to meet at least quarterly. And of course, this is a working committee, so you will probably have tasks to do between those quarterly meetings. So let's start with Allison. You want to introduce yourself and give us a little background so everybody gets to know you?
Sure. Allison Burr, District 5 Alder. I came to Stevens Point for UWSP. Started with a communications major, ended with a waste management major. Thank you, Rob. And I guess I've been in the field ever since I graduated 2018. And I work for Wapaka County as a recycling coordinator. So yeah, sustainability is kind of my thing.
Cool. Doug? Hi, I'm Doug. I currently work at UWSP in the Alumni Association, where I manage communications. Prior to that, for 15 years, I worked in the solar industry. For 9 years, I worked at the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, where I led the Energy Fair. Many of you probably know about that event, but it was the largest and longest running sustainability-themed event in America back in the day. So I did that, and then afterwards, for 6 years, I worked for a solar contractor where I primarily focused on helping communities, schools, municipalities with getting solar on the roof for them.
Thank you very much. Gregory.
I'm Greg Knight, retired former Forest Service employee. Worked on the Shawinigan-Nicolet National Forest in northern Wisconsin and dealt with issues of climate change and disaster mitigation as a result of climate change, like what do you do when you get 18 inches of rain. And then now a resident of Stevens Point. And my interest in this goes way back because climate change and those issues have been around a long time.
Greg, I do have one housekeeping issue. When we had appointments, I misread. We were supposed to have, I'm going to get this wrong, 2 for 3 years and 3 for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I somehow got one wrong. So tonight at council, they'll be correcting that.
Yep.
We can't just change it. We have to go through it because it's codified.
Yep.
We have to go through, and one person Lang is here, 5:35. So that'll get changed tonight. You'll have a new oath of office to sign with a different expiration date. We just knocked a year off.
Yep.
So, Heather?
All right. I'm Heather Phelps. I am at UWSP with the Wisconsin Center for Environmental Education. I've been with them a couple of years now, about a year and a half here in person in Point. And so I help provide resources to educators around the state to teach in large part about renewable energy and sustainable forestry. Those are our two main areas. And so, yeah, my passion in this goes way back. I recall writing essays about the Kyoto Protocol as far back as high school, but this is what I've been doing most recently.
Thank you. And Rob?
So thank you, Allison, for the introduction. I've been here for 16 years now in Stevens Point. I'm a professor of soil science and waste management at the university. I'm involved in a lot of different sustainability-related activities on campus as they branch out in the community as well. Mayor Wiesa, you might remember that you were part of a project for curbside composting, that sort of thing, so we still operate that class to reach out to the community. I'm also involved in a new initiative on campus to create a new integrated sustainability area for the entire campus as it's going to relate to the community and Portage County as well, which is one of the reasons why I was motivated to put my name in for this as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sam, you about ready?
Not about ready. I'll get up there.
Okay. With the election of chair and vice, or chair and secretary, is there any objection to just moving that to the end? I don't know that everybody understands exactly what the responsibilities of the chair and secretary were, and I think we can cover some of that prior to selecting. That'll give you an idea if you want to take on that responsibility. So it says a presentation on the framework and goals per the ordinance, but because it's codified, most of that stuff is already outlined. So the purpose and powers, as stated in the ordinance, are to study and make recommendations to the mayor, the common council, and city staff regarding strategies, projects, priorities, and investments to be adopted by the city for creating and maintaining a sustainable community. The commission's focus shall be on such topics as landscape conservation, clean water, clean air, climate change, environmental stewardship awareness, and efficient use and deployment of resources of all types within the city of Stevens Point. The commission may make recommendations on capital budgets, operating budgets, organization and use of city staff resources, grant opportunities, partnerships with other organizations both within and outside the Stevens Point community, and any other topic the commission identifies to advance its overall purpose. In the creation of this, we're looking at continuing what a path to the sustainable Stevens Point kind of created. That morphed into the Green Tier Legacy Communities, of which we've been a member since its inception, and that's a resource that you will have available. We are a Green Tier Legacy Community member. Opens up opportunities for grants, educational opportunities, all of which would be available to you. And I will be forwarding those emails that I get on to you as a group. We also have talked about setting a baseline. We've kind of done that already, at least to some satisfaction. We have, I think it goes back to 2015, every city building and their energy usage. So basically the WPS bill, so natural gas, electricity, and we have that on a spreadsheet that I will be mailing out to all of you, hopefully this week. That's all done already. Some of the other things that we have tried to do in the past, we have the ability to record how much fuel each piece of equipment uses. There's no easy way to read that. We tried doing it several years ago, and the data dump was massive. So that's something we can work on to try and find a readable way to calculate that. We use it just to know how much fuel each vehicle uses. Every vehicle has its own card. So when you go to fill it up at the city pump, you put your card in, so we know what is used. But that's really just to determine how much fuel we're using. It doesn't talk about mileage, but that's recorded. So you have that ability. As I said, this is going to be a working committee, so if that's some information you want to gather, we can make that available to you. The staff resources are whatever you need, basically, within, you have to be reasonable with your request. You can't demand a department head give you 50,000 pages of data by Friday, but staff resources are available. The intent here is going to be slightly different than some of our other committees in that because this commission is really charged with reviewing all of the departments, that every quarter a new department will be your designated agent. So you will have an opportunity to dive deep into the streets department, the engineering department, the water department, the airport, the transportation department, and so on. So that's the intention. Every quarter, a city department will be selected as the designated agent. Again, giving you the opportunity to kind of really understand what those departments do and where those efficiencies might be. Staff has actually been looking at efficiencies for quite a long time, but they don't always have the resources or the time to find every opportunity. And that's what we're hoping you're going to be able to help with.
Sure. What kind of efficiencies are they looking for, or do they, when they say efficiencies?
Well, what you're charged with in the ordinance. So it could be anything, as we said, relating to climate change, clean air, environmental stewardship, efficient use and deployment of resources. I'll give you an idea of some of the things that we've done in the past. Most of these have been since I took office, but our plow routes, for example, they all are headquartered at the city garage, which is on 6th Avenue. And if a snow event came, all the plows would go down 6th Avenue, go to 2nd Street, some would go south, some would go north, and then they'd go to the next major intersection, some would go this way, some would go that way. That's inefficient. You don't need 8 plows going down the same road. So immediately after 6th Avenue, they separate now, and they each take a road. They had to redo the routes to do that, and that was the very first thing we did. Then we installed GPS on them. So now we use that GPS data, or had used that GPS data to further refine those routes. Then we put GPS data on our garbage trucks. So those are more efficient uses. We have to pick up garbage, we have to plow the roads. But we're saving fuel, and therefore carbon emissions, by not doing the same thing 8 times. So those are some of the efficiencies. Our bus routes are plotted out based on user feedback. So that could be something we could look at if we think that there might be a better route change. I don't know, we see heavy usage on 4th and Division. I'm making stuff up here. But that would be an idea for some efficiencies. Other things that we've done, motion lights. We have 24/7 operations with the police department and the fire department, but they have had regular switches. Well, sometimes they're sleeping or not being used, so we put motion lights in. Of course, we changed all the lights to LED. So that was something. Green hinges, that was something that when I first came on, selling sustainability was a little bit challenging because not everybody was buying into it. I had great success monetizing it. And when you tell the department, boy, you just saved $5,000 and you can use that somewhere else, their eyes perk up. They sit up a little straighter in their chair. And that was my first thing. That was the one that I think got people on board more so than anything else I've done, are these green hinges. So we have overhead doors for the streets garage, parks department, fire department. PD doesn't have a garage. And those overhead doors are for a climate controlled area. So in the summer they're air conditioned, in the winter they're heated because people occupy that space 24/7. Well, as the doors get old, the weather stripping doesn't connect as good. So you lose some of that heat or air conditioning. The green hinges just put a spring on the wheel and it pushes the door into the weather stripping. I think the overall cost was less than $2,000. I think it was about $1,600 to do all of the doors. And they threw Weeza a bone. So yeah, go ahead, spend $1,600. Well, they saved that. We expected about a 1.5 year payback. They paid for themselves the very first year. And like I said, that's when people sat up a little straighter. Okay, what else you got? Since then, it's been pretty easy to sell these efficiencies, and the departments do a pretty good job already of trying to find those, because they know that if they save money, they can use that money somewhere else where they need it. But honestly, anything that's defined in the ordinance is on the table. And even though it's being recorded, I will tell you that even if it's not in the ordinance and you think that we can find some efficiencies, that's on the table too. You are required to follow the ordinance, but that doesn't cover the entire scope of what you can suggest, because you all are citizens as well. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
All right.
Thanks.
The rules are outlined. They're pretty standard. Majority votes. You need a quorum. Doug, you are an alternate. So if the full body is present, you don't get to vote. That's basically what it says. If anybody's missing, you take their place. If two people are missing, you still only get one vote, though.
Come on.
So for you, a quorum is 3. We need at least 3 people to hold the meeting or to do any action. It might not be a bad idea to brush up on some of Robert's Rules of Order. It's a massive book. Not everything is going to come into play. But the League of Wisconsin Municipalities has some great resources regarding boundaries, what you are and are not allowed to do. And that's some of the other things I was going to touch on is open meetings. You are a codified body, which means everything you do must be at a public meeting. So that meeting has to be noticed, agenda'd, and that gets done through the clerk's office. We have to publish it no more or no less than 24 hours. Generally, we give several days. 24 hours is the minimum statutory requirement, but we want to give the public as much notice as possible. So several days before the meeting, the agenda has to go out, gets posted in specific locations, and sent to the media, which is our newspaper of record, which is the Portage County Gazette. Once the agenda is completed, the clerk will handle all of that, so you don't need to worry about it. But it's important to note that no action can take place outside the meetings, because that's a violation of open meetings laws. The quorum issue, this really only comes into play with communication amongst yourselves. It is a violation of open meetings to discuss items with a quorum. So if Doug talks to, I don't know, Greg and Bob, that would be a violation outside an open meeting. You can get around that, work within that. I don't want to say get around, that sounds bad. You can work within that. So if you find a piece of information, like, hey, there's this really cool grant opportunity, can we get this on the next agenda? You can send that to the clerk's office, and the clerk can send it out to all the members. The issue only comes into play when it's interaction, which is another thing. Even in City Hall, you'll have a mailing group. But if you get a mail, don't reply to all. That's a really bad thing, because inadvertently, if you reply to all, you could violate open meetings. Generally, what I tell people to do is send it through the clerk's office. The clerk's office is aware of all of these rules, and they'll make sure we don't violate anything. And then never reply to all.
So if we want to share information that we found personally, we should send it to the clerk, and the clerk will
say,
distribute
clerk,
it?
could you please disseminate that to the Sustainability Commission and or alders and or whatever appropriate people you think it is.
Okay.
Right? If it's related to public transportation, Transit Department might be a good idea. If it's related to the Streets Garage, the Streets Director, that sort of thing. And if you ever have questions about is this or is this not a violation, you also have access to the city attorney. So if there's a question about what you can or can't do, contact the city attorney. He'll make sure that he advises you in the proper way. Open records. Open records, so a record is defined as any document or electronic document that is retained as a record. So if I'm writing notes, much like Greg is, that is not considered an open record, right? They're his notes. If he copies those notes and shares them with everybody, that becomes an open record. If you text Heather, that becomes an open record. If you email the clerk, that becomes an open record. And you are responsible for your own records. So if you use your personal cell phone or personal email for this, that could be subject to open records. Meaning anybody can say, hey, I'd like to see Bob's cell phone. They can do that. If you use it for anything related to this commission.
Would that include everything on the cell phone or only those things
If you use it for the commission, it could potentially open up everything on your phone. So let's say you send me a text tomorrow that says, hey, Mike, can you send me the thing that you told me you were going to send me last night? That now has your cell phone creating a record, and someone could say, hey, I'd like to see Heather's cell phone. You have to, well, you'll work it out with the city attorney and the clerk. But yeah, in theory, someone could come and look at your pictures to make sure that there's nothing nefarious on there. I don't know what could be, but yes, it could open up your personal email and your personal cell phone to public records.
Okay, follow-up question. Is there an alternative? Like, will we be getting some?
Don't do it. That's the alternative. So you can, you can get an email.
Yeah.
Phone calls they're not records. Well, the phone log could be, dang it, and I told Logan, I think I got it covered. I don't think you need to be here. I'll confirm that and send it out to you. The best, safest thing, and the city attorney will tell you this because he's told me this 100 times, don't do it.
Okay, but like, assuming we need to periodically get information about the commission, is like, as part of this commission, would we get a City of Stevens Point email address? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight.
Okay, very good. I'm getting ahead of things.
Okay. Yes, so you have the opportunity to get, and I strongly recommend that you do, a city email address. Our format is generally first initial of the first name, then your last name at stevenspoint.com. That's the format we'd like to stick to.
Who do we get this from?
I will arrange that through our IT department. And then you can log on through, we have a web interface. So it's just stevenspoint.com/mail. So you'll get an email and a generic password to start out. First thing you do when you log in is change your password. So any questions about the open records? I'm going to get material for you, but the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, which is a resource for you, if you go to the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, search for new officials or open records or ethics, they've got tons of documents that will help you. But I'm going to get physical information for you. I just don't have it yet. No, we didn't really have anything here for public comment.
It's relevant to open records on what you said was incorrect earlier, so could we have clarification for public record?
Sure you can, but I vetted this through the attorney. What did I say that was wrong? I need you to come to the lectern, though.
Yes, absolutely. So, personal materials on private accounts are not subject to disclosure. So to be clear, you would not have to turn over like your Gmail, and all of your emails from your whole life would be read. Only relevant records, so the contents of your phone would not be subject to general scrutiny, to be clear about that.
Okay, and to be clear, I'm going to confirm that with the city attorney because I was told differently. They can examine your phone. So they can't say, I want all of Heather's emails from June. But they can say, I want to examine Heather's phone. That potentially opens it up. I will confirm that. I'll see the city attorney in about an hour, so I will confirm that and get that out to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out, because that's not the way it was explained to me, so I'll confirm it. But yeah, your personal information, like they can't say, I want all of your emails from June or all of your phone calls from whatever. Best thing to do, though, is use your city email, and you won't have to worry about it.
Sounds good.
All right. Dang it. I lost track now. We were doing open meeting, or open records. I gave you the resources for the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. Oh, yeah. Now, the city resources. So you have access to the clerk's office. I strongly suggest you use that as your go-to point. So if you say, hey, I found this cool grant, or maybe this is a future agenda item, go through the clerk's office. She is the official record keeper for the city. Your own records you're required to do on your own. But she is the official record keeper for the city. And like I said, she's very well versed in what we can and can't do. So as long as it goes through her office, or their office, whomever that happens to be a her currently, they'll make sure that the rest of whoever you need to get it, gets it, and that we don't violate any open meetings laws. The emails, is everybody okay with first initial, last name at stevenspoint.com?
Yes.
Okay. Alders already have it, so I will get those set up, and then you will get an email. Jesus. Yes. We'll get you confirmation on how to log in, and then the first thing you'll do is change your password. You'll get a generic password, each of you, to get in, because we have to set that up, and then change your password right away, and I'll get you a document that shows you how to get into that email.
Sounds good.
We'll figure out how to do that. I think that was it. Does anybody else have any questions? This will evolve, I'm sure. But any questions at this point? Okay. All right. So the duties of the chair will be kind of what I'm doing now. You are responsible for calling the meeting to order, keeping order at the meeting, and just making sure generally that during the meeting we follow the rules that we need to follow. Things can come into play, like if we wanted to start talking about, I'm really bad at on-the-spot things, so I'm going to say cheeseburgers. If we want to start talking about cheeseburgers, we can't, because it's not on the agenda. And the chair needs to be the person who kind of watches that to make sure that you're following the right rules. It's not terribly difficult, right? We're talking about, again, I can't come up with anything good. How to collect data. If it's not on the agenda, you can't talk about it. And they err on this, what Logan says, you have to err on the side of perception. So if I have an item on the agenda that is talking about cheeseburgers, and we want to talk about double cheeseburgers, it's a gray area, and the chair has to make that call. It's not always easy, and the general rule is when it starts getting way off topic, if we were starting to talk about fish sandwiches, that's not on the agenda. The way you look at it is, does the agenda item tell you what we're talking about? As any member of the general public reads this, can they get an understanding of what we're talking about? I'll give you an example tonight, for example. We have parking ordinances on. If we generically said parking ordinances, that would be too broad for the general public to get an understanding of what it is. So we list the specific ordinance number, and then there's a memo inside that talks about the specific details of whatever parking change it happens to be. Another one that we have on the agenda for council tonight is changing the transportation ordinance, and I forget what the actual number is. There was a referendum a few years back, if you remember, putting a limit of $1 million, anything greater than $1 million, and we would have to go to public referendum. And that one states, ordinance amendment to approve the ordinance amendment in section 4.18 of the revised municipal code relating to the referendum requirement for transportation projects. If we were to start talking about any other referendum question or anything outside of transportation, maybe we want to talk about the cost of fire trucks. We can't do that because that's not agenda. Does that make sense? Any member of the public has to have a reasonable understanding of what you're going to be discussing. If you stray from that, it could potentially be a violation. But again, the city attorney will tell you, just don't do it.
Yeah, and, my take on that is when you're setting up the agenda, and if you have a topic of discussion, for example, the committee's going to talk about objectives for community sustainability, definition of what that means. Potentially that's a broad topic, but you're talking about the topic of sustainability. So I would say that would be okay, because you're letting the public know you're going to be discussing the topic of sustainability, and potentially that generates a lot of discussion and broad perspectives of what that means. Because one of the challenges I see for this committee is narrowing down our objectives and coming to agreement on what kind of product we actually want to produce out of this committee in the next couple of years.
Sure. And you don't have to make those decisions on your own. Every agenda that we have goes through the city attorney. The city attorney then vets it. Is this too broad? One of the things that frustrated me when I became mayor is I wanted to have a sit down. Let's get all of the alders together and talk about what we want to do with the city, for the next 5 years or even this year. You can't have an agenda item that broad. I've been told repeatedly, and it stinks, because that seems conducive to good governance, right? So you have to narrow that up a little bit. So we could talk about comprehensive plan in this particular area. That is specific enough, but you can't just have a housing agenda item. You can't just say, we're going to talk about housing. That's not specific enough. But those aren't my calls or your calls to make. Those all go through the city attorney, who is our parliamentarian. So he'll make that determination. You, however, will be responsible for kind of setting the agenda. So those items will go through the clerk's office. Hey, I want to talk about our goals and what we can do as it relates to the streets department. That is probably narrow enough. Or we want to talk about reducing our fossil fuel consumption. I'm not the city attorney, but I think that's probably narrow enough. So if he sees that something seems to be a bit too broad, he'll call you for clarification. But if you have any of those items that you want to see on the next agenda, whatever agenda there is, send them to the clerk's office. I'd like to talk about this. And they will compile them, and whoever is the designated agent for that meeting will work with the chair to put those items into an agenda. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's kind of it for the chair duties. Your ordinance says that in the event that the chair is out, so let's say Mike is chair and I can't make it tonight, your ordinance says that you will select one as your first item of business. And that just means pick somebody to run the meeting. In other committees, we have a vice chair, but in the ordinance that was brought forward, it doesn't allow for that. So if the chair isn't available, the body that remains picks someone. And in this case, the chair does vote. At the Common Council, the mayor is chair. The mayor only votes in the event of a tie. If I'm on another committee, I can still vote. But as chair of the Common Council, statutorily, I only vote in the case of a tie. But the chair is able to vote for this commission on anything. And then a secretary. The secretary would be responsible for taking the minutes. Minutes are required for every meeting, and it's attendance. You don't have to get terribly in detail, like the agenda that we just went through. Presentation by staff on the framework and goals of the ordinance, discussed the ordinance, discussed open meetings, discussed walking quorums, open records. Comment was made that the personal items are not admissible. Chair will follow up. Motion by so-and-so, seconded by so-and-so, state the motion. Roll call is whatever it is. You're not alone in that either. We can get staff to help, especially the first few times. But the minutes are not a terribly large item, and our meetings are recorded. So you don't have to take notes necessarily at the meeting. Probably a good idea. But you don't have to, because the meetings will be recorded. You can go back and get anything you want from there. So those are the 2 positions that we need to elect. And once you elect a chair, the chair would then be responsible for the rest of selecting the secretary and discussing the future meeting dates. Those are the only things left on our agenda. Is there any questions about any of those? Sam, you're going to continue to sit in the back?
No, if I may sit, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, no problem at all. Yeah, you should just come forward anytime you're ready. And I'll state it again for whoever's going to take minutes here that Alderperson Lang arrived at 5:35 and is present.
I do have a question. Earlier, we were talking about staff resources available for the committee to look at, and I don't know if this is tonight's the right place to discuss this, but there was a contract with Slipstream between the university and the city that did a study and a baseline or did something here. I just have a copy of the grant application, but
Okay.
I'm just wondering if that's an example of something we could ask for, or is that something still ongoing, or is that something that?
So we actually didn't get that grant. But
So
we have worked with Slipstream on a couple of occasions to apply for grants. All of the documents relating to that from the city are available to you. Those are what you would call the open record. You don't need to put in an official request to the clerk.
So there's no information from this?
Well, I don't know what you have there, because like I said, we worked with them a few times. I can get you any of the information, I just don't know which one that is.
This was the Energy Innovation Grant Program.
But that was the 2022 one?
Yeah.
And
2022, okay.
I think it was the 2023 that the city received?
Yeah, we didn't get any of the ones that we worked with for Slipstream, and I think there were 2 or 3. I can get you all of the documentation for Slipstream. I'll send it out to the entire group.
Okay.
Electronically, that'll be great. I cannot get you necessarily, I'll ask, but they are not obligated to give us any documentation on their end.
Sure.
That wasn't provided to the city as part of the contract.
Sure.
And that'll be the same with anything. If it's a private company, they don't have to give you the records unless they were part of a contract with the city.
Okay. That answers that.
Any other questions? Okay, so the way the election of the chair works, that's spelled out pretty clearly. We open the floor for nominations. You may nominate yourself. We will continue the nomination process until there is no response after 3 calls. After that, if there's one person that was nominated, we will, the proper motion would be to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for whomever that was. If there are more than one nominated, the process would be an election. So every member would have a vote to choose the chair. They're not private, secret votes. Or they could decide amongst themselves that one would drop out. So you only have one candidate. Is everybody clear on that one?
Yes.
Okay, so with that, I am going to call for nominations for chair of the Stevens Point Sustainability Commission. Are there any nominations?
I'll volunteer.
Okay, Craig? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? And for the third and final time, are there any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, I would ask for a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Greg Knight as chair of the Stevens Point Sustainability Commission?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, hang on. I'm not used to doing this, so I got...
Thank you.
Second. Sorry. So the motion has been seconded to close nomination, cast unanimous ballot for Greg Knight as chair. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Greg, do you need me to go over the procedure? Because you now are responsible for getting a secretary elected.
Okay. So I will open the floor for nominations of secretary. Do we have any nominations? Any volunteers?
Am I allowed to do this as the alternate member?
Yes. So you wouldn't vote unless someone was absent or excused, but you still would be able to act as secretary for all of the meetings.
Then I would nominate myself.
Okay?
Do we have any other nominations? If not, I will close the nominations.
3 times.
Do we have any nominations? Do we have any nominations? Okay. I'll ask for a motion and cast a unanimous ballot for, I'm sorry.
The motion would be to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Doug Stingle as secretary of the Stevens Point Sustainability Commission.
Exactly.
Yes.
I can so move.
There you go.
Second.
Motion by Heather, second by
Burr.
Allison Burr.
Allison.
And then you would just call for the vote.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And then you have to state what happened as chair. Motion passes.
Motion passes.
Yeah, it's rules.
Okay.
All right, so the only other thing left on your agenda is discussion of future meeting dates.
Okay, future meeting dates.
I know Heather had a restriction, you can only meet after 5:30, right?
Yes.
Does anybody have an issue with that? Okay. So I think we've determined at least after 5:30.
Okay, so my question there is a 5:30 meeting time, is that acceptable to everybody? Is that a problem, or? Okay.
For me, I would say just not on Tuesdays. Just not this week. I normally have a Tuesday evening class from 5 to 8.
Okay. No Tuesdays for the date.
Anybody else have date restrictions?
Anybody else have days of the week?
And this isn't set in stone either. It's like,
Yeah.
2 years from now, you don't have to meet at 5:30 on Wednesday. You can make those decisions as a body.
So, and one way we can deal with that is after each meeting, we set the next meeting date, and if there is conflicts, we can deal with that at that time and adjust it, right? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
The goal is to have at least a quorum. The goal should be to have everybody present.
Right.
But you can't meet without a quorum. If you don't have at least 3 people show up, you cannot meet and discuss anything.
Does, setting like a calendar of dates help anybody where it's like, okay, it's going to be a little different in July, but like we know beforehand, like, so we can plan versus, month to month kind of thing. Is that something that helps with anything? It's like, hey, this is where we'll be in June, this is where we'll be in July, August, September, like those kind of things. We can pick different dates, different times, but like just work on like having a little bit more than a month of notice, that kind of a thing. Does that help anybody, in any way? I'm like, it helped me is why I bring it up. Knowing where I'm going to be more than a month, just a few weeks in time, like that helps me with like planning. So like I would be open to like considering, say, a series of dates, I don't know, 6 months at a time, a year, like if we're going to like pick say the third Thursday of every month or something like that, like at 5:30 or 6 o'clock or something like that, then we have our whole calendar for us. Or if we're going to do it like, okay, we're going to do something on Earth Day. And so like we pick, in April, we're going to do something like that just to like, and depend on like what's going on, pick a different date throughout the month. Like I'm just like, as we consider that, I'm just like wondering, is there something that helps us as a body get together with regularity by going with, say, a certain Thursday, let's say, for an example, a third Thursday or, the second Wednesday? Does that help anybody knowing that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and also just to back up a step from your comment, I gather we are expected to meet a minimum of once a quarter, but as I think you were implying, I would be in favor of meeting more often than once a quarter, and so once a month sounds like a good frequency to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess I vote like the first or second Thursday, because I feel like the end of the month gets busy.
Okay.
Okay, so first or second Thursday of each month?
Of those two, I would prefer first Thursday.
First Thursday.
Does that work for everybody? First Thursday of the month?
Do we have any conflicts with other committees? Like, no? Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Thursdays are pretty wide open.
All right.
Okay, so
Wow,
first
that's
Thursday
awesome.
of each month. At 5:30.
Okay.
It took me longer to get this meeting set.
It helps when we are all in the same room.
It does.
Right. That helps for sure.
And should we establish this as a calendar for, let's say, the next 5 months, 6 months? How
6
many
months.
in a row in case you decide you need to adjust or?
You don't have to do that now if you don't want
Okay.
to. You
All right.
can, but you
We
really
don't have to get that detailed yet? All right. Just know that if
Till
we're
it
going to
changes, you can do it this way.
Okay. Just know that if we call a meeting for the month, it's going to be on that first Thursday at 5:30.
One of the things that I have in a couple of other committees that I would suggest doing this one, if you're unsure, is just put that discussion of future meeting dates on the bottom of every agenda or next meeting date. And if you don't have anything to talk about, you just skip that item.
Okay. Sounds good.
Consideration I would also make is that virtual attendance is made available, as like tonight, this doesn't have like a Zoom link that anybody can come in and see how this was done. And when we meet, I don't know if like how we do that, how we can work with either the IT, but like so that, yeah, we got a video record, but so people can also like attend to these meetings virtually.
Okay.
So I guess I would ask generally then, just based on our discussion, are we planning to meet in 2 weeks? That would be February 6th, would be the first Thursday in February, or do we want to meet the first week of March to give us some time to review procedures, brainstorm on our own? Kind of open question.
Yeah, I was thinking March. I was like, I don't know what we talk about in 2 weeks. Yeah. So that makes sense to just, start in March and kind of like, then it'll be the first Thursday every time.
Okay.
Okay.
That works.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
Do you know who, you said we were going to have like a department each quarter. Do you know who the first department's going to be?
I was going to talk to the chair about that after the meeting.
Okay, fair.
Does anybody have any?
It's one of those it's not on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Is that something for
Okay.
consideration?
I don't know that
next month,
anybody will call us out on it, but it's best just to follow the rules.
Gotcha.
If someone has an idea, maybe you want to start at a certain department, like I said, send those ideas to the clerk, and then we'll get them to the chair, and the chair can make that decision.
Yeah,
By staff.
would it, is there a good place to go to see what the department list is? Is that just,
StevensPoint.com.
okay.
There's a lot of information there. And if you have questions, the clerk is a resource. I can be a resource. The city attorney is always a resource.
Sounds good. And,
When in doubt, go to the clerk's office first.
all right.
Just a point of reference, most of our documentation is online too. So the path to a sustainable Stevens Point, if you don't have access to it, it's on the website. Green Tier Legacy Community information is also on the website. But if there's something you'd like to see, the slipstream stuff I know isn't on the website, but I'm going to get that to you. I'm going to get your email set up, and I'm going to get you some Green Tier Legacy community information. But everything else is pretty much on the website.
Okay, so suggestions for next meeting in March for the department. We just send that to the clerk.
Yes. Like I said, I was going to talk to whoever was the chair to see where you wanted to start, whoever that chairperson happened to be.
And, the only
But
thing
you
I'm thinking about with that is if we don't, we can each submit ideas, but we'll probably each pick a different
As
department.
chair, that's your job now.
Do I get to pick it?
Welcome to the party.
All right. Okay. So we'll have a department.
And I will tell you this when we were going to meet, but it would be in everyone's best interest to take everybody's ideas and make a list. So you know that in March you're dealing with X, and in April you're dealing with Y, and in May you're going to deal with Z. So you have a schedule that's going to help our department heads and help the general public know what you're going to kind of be topic related on.
Can we just let everybody know tonight that they should just contact the clerk and let the clerk know which departments they prefer to start with?
Sure.
And then when I talk to the clerk,
I think that's completely okay.
What's the,
I'll have to let the clerk know these things are coming.
Yeah,
But
sure.
absolutely.
No, that's a good way to do it.
That's completely fine.
Okay.
So maybe quick clarification on that. Do you want us to wait until we have a Stevens Point email address in order to do that?
You can call the clerk's office too if
Doesn't
you
matter.
like. Again, I don't know that anybody's ever going to call you out on it. The city attorney's advice is always just don't do it. I will get these emails set up in the next couple of days, and we'll get that information out. But if you want to call the clerk's office and say, hey, listen, can you send this or whatever it happens to be, I don't think an email is going to be the end of the world in this case. Just know that it does constitute an open record. And the clerk will have that, so kind of gets you off the hook. That's why we ask everything goes through the clerk's office. So they have it, and you don't have to necessarily worry about it. Clerk, could you please send this to Community Development Director or whatever. You don't need to do that, but it does make things a little bit cleaner.
Okay, I think that's the last
That's it.
item on the agenda, so.
And you get to adjourn. Now, you can adjourn either way. Some people want a motion to adjourn, and then you do a vote. But generally, the Roberts rules say you can adjourn at the will of the chair.
And I will, unless there's any other comments, I will adjourn at the chair. We'll adjourn the meeting.
And we have 6:24.
I won.
Yeah.
You won. The prize.
That's kind of prize. Yeah. Finance, she probably should have been a CPA or something. My husband
That wasn't good.
doesn't, and he's like, thank goodness.
I was like, sure, well, I mean, it's a family size, it shouldn't just be my dinner, it should be all of our dinner.
Better living through chocolate, right?
Wait, I might have it.
Your life list, the 3 million.
Peanut butter M&Ms? Wait, maybe I did do that. Is that, no, I was like, what will get me through this meeting? Merlin. I didn't have time for it. I was like, there's peanut butter, there's protein in them. This is the only feed. Okay, hold on.
Looking at my paper.
Let's go sit out in the backyard for after.
Yeah, he's wandering around. Is that what it's
She'll touch you right at the right moment.
Sean was for asking me to
That one, and
and my hair was
I naturally
just blinding
explore
people.
your location. Look at this. There's some people in Stevens Point that are extremely.
Well, it's so much warmer when my hood is
You break your mullet.
It's like literally.
John, you made it. Thank you.
Me too.
I don't even wear a hat.
Hair to cover it.
Yeah, it's a lot to it.
Yeah, thanks. I do, because I didn't copy it. I always try and
Party back. Get your own little empire there? Cyrus, man.
It sounds like
I don't think I sent a nice email to all the members.
my city council stuff.
So it's just like reality. It's a reality going on.
Yeah,
It's
close door.
Yeah, it's process. I mean,
Yeah, I was outside at like 7:30. So I was like, oh. What am I doing? What's that?
3 minutes.
Where did they come from?
Oh, yes, it's here. Everyone is here.
I did get so quiet all of a sudden. Holy moly, Rocky.
This is not good.
There's diamonds. Here we go.
Professional meeting in front of everyone.
Either that or be angry.
Oh, eat away, please.
2 minutes.
Oh my God.
Oh, the clock's a
Did you
little
get angry?
Which item?
How's our missing council?
It wasn't. Call it.
Good question.
Sick a couple of weeks ago.
Her sister Roseanne.
For some reason, when it's all the
Two new ones, too, though.
Oh, that's not the same thing.
That's why I ended up.
You know there's no action on that, right? Okay. Can we move you up to item number 4, which is, it's not an agenda item because it's not really anything that's having action tonight. So we'll just move you up to 4.
Well,
The sacraments are.
no. It's the,
Oh my goodness.
for the grant.
It's right there by the township. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. That's one generation off.
Oh, here.
We have got everybody. They're all here.
She's real close.
To see everybody.
Yeah.
1 minute. If anybody wishes to speak on an agenda item, I'd ask that you fill out one of these little white slips if you haven't already.
Can I have a little motion? It's nice stuff. I like it when it's very. She was there just like, I wish it's very Thank you. You're welcome. Thank God.
At 7 o'clock, we will call the regular meeting of the City of Stevens Point Common Council to order. Clerk, could we get a roll, please?
Christensen.
Here.
Guthrie.
Here.
Keemer.
Here.
Broderick.
Here.
Burr.
Here.
Steinmetz.
Here.
Kneebone. Here. Shuda.
Hi.
Lang.
Here.
Boozy.
Here.
Morrow.
Here.
And everyone is present. Please join me in our salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, I see we got an audience.
We do have a number of things on the agenda tonight, so I will forego my opening remarks. Again, anyone wishing to speak on any of our agenda items, we ask that you fill out one of these white sheets so we have that information ahead of time. Alrighty. Then we will move on to item number 3, which is persons who wish to address the council and mayor on a specific agenda item other than a public hearing must register their request at this time. Those who wish to address the common council during a public hearing are not required to identify themselves until the public hearing is declared open by the mayor. We do not have a public hearing on tonight's agenda. So we will move on to item number 4. Item number 4 is persons who wish to address the mayor and council for up to 3 minutes regarding a non-agenda item. Alderperson Kneebone, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. A week or two ago, there was a veterans benefit event in Plover, and I went. For those who don't know, I'm a Vietnam-era Air Force veteran, and thought, what the heck? And I also wanted to mention, for those of us who served prior to, I believe it's May 1st, 1975, we are eligible now for the National Honor Flight, and I just signed up for that. I'm on the wait list. With luck, I'll go in spring of 2026. It's our turn. That's the tagline now for the National Honor Flight. So for those of us who served during the Vietnam era, sign up, get on the list, and let's go for a ride. I also got some information. We've got a veteran service officer that works for the county, John Olson. There's information on helping homeless veterans. So there's a lot of services out there for vets. So let's take advantage of what's out there. Talk to the veteran service officer, sign up for the National Honor Flight, and let's all go together. Thank you.
Great. There's also a couple of upcoming fundraisers for the Honor Flight, including Guns and Hoses, which will be, I think it's July 10th?
That's a great event.
Maybe. More information on that will be coming. So thank you, Alderperson Kneebone, and thank you for your service. We also have Andrea Olson.
Andrea Olson, 410 Franklin Street, and I wanted to talk about the future city office buildings because that is something that there has been zero community outreach, as in community outreach not just having open meetings, and there has been little to no talk on there's been very little talk in the media about it either. And some of the information that has been out there, they're deleting any public comments on it if you do provide any information that you've, like links to the council meetings for notes on anything too. So it's a little frustrating. The city has a Facebook page, you have a website. It would be great to put some information out there to the public because I'm guessing that you're going to try to use some type of TIF funding for a location. And I'm just wondering, the real question for this is how much square footage does the city really need? Because the amount of square footage that you need will determine the building that's desired, or if you really should be buying or building or renting a space. Because when you're looking at the buildings that have been brought up, you have the Portage County Courthouse right now is about the 48,000 square feet, and that's 12,000 square feet of offices, if that's the actual amount of square footage that is needed. So you're looking at taking a building off the tax record, the executive place, that's 37,000 square feet, that's $82,000 that would be removed from the tax base. You look at Chase Bank, another one that was mentioned, that's 21,000 square feet, probably one of the most valuable properties in the city. Do we need to be showing people that are coming to visit, oh look, here's our great office building, or do we need to be utilizing that space for, if the city ends up buying it, rent it out to a restaurant, and they build the build-out costs. The city doesn't have to always be responsible for renovating a building to make it usable by somebody else. But that building is over $56,000 off the tax base, and there's two parts to that building. So if you're looking at needing about 6,000 square feet, and you're doing your normal $17 per square foot past the rate of $575, meaning your lease cost is $22.75 per square foot. If you need 6,000 square feet, that's $11,000, $375 per month, or $136,500 per year. when you're looking at the cost or how many years a building will be viable, let's figure 30 to 50 years is what they guess. It'll take 29 years to actually hit that $4 million mark. So should we really be looking at renting or buying? Question to ask. And if we are building a new transit center, there was going to be office space above that, was in the discussions. Shouldn't city offices be considered above that so that we don't continue to take buildings off the tax base? And the city also does own the last part of the mall still, the Elder Bierman. And that building, we paid $30,000 for research on that building to turn it into possibly a conference center if there is demand for that. That was over a year ago, and the public hasn't even seen that report. So why isn't that building being considered? Or is it? But we don't know because we get no input right now.
Thank you, Andrea. Neil Prendergast? And just for the sake of clarity, I know you wanted to speak on the item from the Public Works, but since there was no action items there, we decided to put it on the non-agenda item so you can speak your piece.
Okay, thanks. I just wasn't sure how to fill out the sheet. Neil Prendergast, 1924 Plover Street. And I just, really kind of simple comment, actually, for the council to hear. I just wanted to kind of raise the issue of the Hoover and Industrial Park intersection, which I know has been kind of going through Finance Committee and then also, I think, Public Works recently for signalization. And I just kind of wanted to kind of put it in everyone's view that this is a super important intersection in the city for bicyclists and pedestrians. Mostly because of the intersection of three multi-use paths there. There's, of course, the Hoover path, there's the patch, or maybe it's Industrial Park path, I don't know what it would be properly called there. And then also there's the little kind of like connector that gets you to Jarens, which ultimately gets you to the Heartland Trail, which is pretty much the safest and best way for someone to get underneath or across the interstate highway. So that Hoover intersection is like a super critical one for bicyclists, and it might not be something you're aware of if you're not pedaling over in that area, but it's really important. So I would just encourage you to kind of keep your eye on how the project design is going and to make certain that there's a really kind of safe and adequate way for bicyclists to use it. And I would just say, particularly because the people using those paths are not necessarily the bicyclists who are gung-ho and who are going to go in the kind of the most aggressive roads in town and just really feel comfortable in a lot of traffic. For instance, right now, if you're going in Industrial Park and you want to get to Jarens, you've got to make a left turn and you've got to have traffic to your right and you've got to have traffic to your left. I mean, very few people really want to do that. So I think something that really kind of takes into account the type of bicyclist that we'll see over in that intersection would be really great. So just thanks for keeping your eyes on that intersection.
And Neil, in case it helps, in case there's questions for everybody else, council approved the funding for that in the capital budget back in October, I think it was.
Right.
So the signalized intersections at both of those are already approved.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. I have no one else under item number 4, so we'll move on to item number 5, the consent agenda. Mr. President?
I would move adoption of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Morrow. Discussion?
One clarifying question.
Sure.
This would be item 5M, related to...
Mike?
M as in Mike, related to the error correction for the Sustainability Commission. Yep. I am curious, I understand the reasoning behind this was that we have a certain number of folks for a 2-year term, a certain number of folks for a 3-year term. We appointed too many to the 3-year term, so we had to reduce someone's term by a year. As you know, of course, about an hour ago, Mr. Knight was selected to be the chair of this committee, and so I'm wondering, could you, just for public record, explain how you selected him out of the 3 for whose term to reduce?
Of all of the existing members, I knew Mr. Knight the least, really just 2 conversations prior to appointment. I discussed it with him, he was okay with it, so that's the one I chose.
Thank you.
It wasn't arbitrary, but it didn't have a whole lot of logic behind it, other than the fact that I knew him less.
Thank you for that explanation.
And for those of you who may be watching, there was an error correction when we created the Sustainability Commission. It was created so by ordinance, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but it was We had to have 2 members with 3-year terms and 3 members with 2-year terms, and I made the mistake in my memo. It's on me, it's my fault, we're correcting it. It was an interesting note, though, that it went through my spell checker and corrector, it went through the clerk, it went through the committee, all the members of the council, and it was a citizen that brought it to my attention. So it shows that we've got some good citizen participation. We probably wouldn't have caught it had it not been for that citizen. So great, we are correcting it. Anything else? Comments from the audience? Hearing and seeing none, the motion is to approve the consent agenda, and the clerk will call the roll.
Christensen.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Keemer.
Aye.
Broderick. Aye. Burr.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Shuda.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Morrow.
Aye.
And that's approved. Item number 6 is an ordinance amendment, a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend Chapter 23 of the zoning ordinance of the revised municipal code. Said request amends Section 23.04 Sub 2 for the purpose of amending the definition of household entity and household entity plus. And that is, if you recall, moving from 3 unrelated and 4 unrelated, 4 unrelated for owner occupied, 3 unrelated for non-owner occupied. There was also a letter of support that was sent to the council from a Jennifer Burton. You should have all gotten that in your email. There may be some others, and we do have a few people wishing to speak. First one up is Andrea Olson.
Hi, I spoke on this a couple times because I am against this ordinance change, and I reached out to my alder, and I was told that there was no way to actually have people register and pay for registering an additional person in the home or in any property. However, that does not mean that we cannot, or that the city, or where was it, sorry, that the city can't determine at what point we consider a house a rooming house. Is it when you're 2 people living together and then you add 1 more person? Is that a rooming house? Is it when you own a house and then it's 3 unrelated people in there and you add 1 more person? Is that a rooming house? Because you can create a stipulation for if you have a rooming house by having X amount of people, you do need to register with that, or register that with the city for 1 year. Then by doing that, you can get all this information that you want to be tracking. And this is what Milwaukee does, and Waukesha also does it. It allows them to, okay, a rooming house didn't register, well, that property no longer can be a rooming house. And some of them even require that if you want to be a rooming house, then you have to have all of your exterior and any code violations have to be brought up to code. Meaning that then if you do have a bad landlord or something that has a bunch of violations, but there's no way really to get them to improve that, you can then have them do that work, bring the current property up to code before they're allowed to have that 3rd person in there, because you're registering it now as a rooming house for that 1 year. Also, it gives opportunities for families that own their properties, if they don't think that they can do any of the repairs on the exterior of their home, to learn about the different grants that the city is offering. So there's opportunities then to help improve our neighborhoods by doing this. I am also against this because you can see what's been happening. If you aren't supposed to pay more than 30% of your individual income should be spent on housing, that means that the house that's $2,300 on or a block over has 5 to 7 people living there right now. 5 currently are living in there, and they aren't related. So that means that it is $2,300 a month is what they get charged, $460 per person for 5 people. That means for that single family to be able to own or to rent that house, they have to be making $92,000 a year. And this is about a 1,600 square foot house. I don't think it has a basement either, and it's a rental property. But those students are only paying $460 each. So it is pushing families out of those houses. And you have to be able to hear $27,600 a year. That's how much you will be paying in rent. That's how much a family would have to be paying. So our rent, the rates for rent are getting increased. There are a lot of lower priced options still out there, and there are a lot of rooming houses right now that are out there, but there are some properties that are only renting to students. So they're using discriminatory rental practices by only allowing students to rent from them. If you're saying our recent grads are the people that might be wanting to stay around here, well, if they could have the opportunity to rent those places too, if it wasn't being only students. So we do have some other options out there, and if this is passed, which I'm guessing it's going to be passed, I think that it's just going to continue to increase rent and encourage more, like we're at 49% that's investor owned. How high do we really want to get? And how many families do you want to not be able to afford to rent in our lower properties or lower income properties pretty much that's downtown and around that area? Because those ones aren't valued as much, and they're the ones that always get hit with this type of stuff.
Thank you. Next up, we have Deb Knipple. Deb, before you start, though, I feel compelled, because this has happened, you certainly can approach. But I just wanted to make the council and those people listening and watching aware that Ms. Olson has made some accusations repeatedly of over-occupancy and violations. I heard discriminatory rental practices. All of those things have been turned over to community development, and we have not found anything substantiating any of those claims. Is that correct, Director? Correct. And the director acknowledged. So if you have questions or concerns, I would urge you to contact the community development director. If you have anybody watching has a concern about a violation of any form, you can certainly bring those to the attention of the community development department as well, and our inspection department. But I just wanted to go on record saying that those allegations have yet to be are currently unfounded. Deb, I'm sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Deb Knipple. I'm here on behalf of Frame Memorial Presbyterian Church, 1300 Main Street, and as a citizen of Stevens Point, 611 Sumery Avenue. And I've been attending the Planning Commission meetings and have expressed my support for the changes of the definition of household entity, and I continue to support that change. Housing is a fundamental human need and a key step to eradicating systemic poverty. This change would allow families and single individuals of all ages to combine resources to create more stable homes. This proposed change is based on recommendations from the 2023 City of Stevens Point Housing Task Force report and reaffirms the 2017 City of Stevens Point Housing Study. So it has been studied by our local people. There are several groups working on the housing issue, and this change would be a step in the right direction to allow more individuals to be housed. I urge you to adopt this change in definition of housing entity. It's a compassionate, practical step towards addressing housing challenges and creating a community where all can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. That does exhaust our speaker list. Back to council. Questions, comments, or a motion?
I'd move approval.
Move approval by Lang. Is there a second?
I'll
Seconded by
second.
Kneebone. Discussion.
I think there's
Don't feel you have to. Yes, go ahead.
I think there's been quite a bit of discussion on this, and I think this is an incremental change. I think it'll behoove the council to keep an eye on it and monitor it. As has been discussed at other meetings, we probably won't know the full impact of this for at least probably 2 to 3 years. But I think we still need to keep it on our radar and make sure that it's having the impact that we're hoping that it will have.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this was discussed quite in-depthly at Plan Commission twice. And I mean, overall, even though those commissioners were supportive, they did have some concerns and reservations. I guess my sense is that if there are issues, it's going to be code violation issues. And so what I would advocate for is that we keep an eye on that, and perhaps we need more funding or more staff in that code enforcement area. I know it's been discussed, and I don't know what the possibility or likelihood of this is, but can parking enforcement help with some of that? If people are parking on the grass or on the lawn, is that a parking violation? So I think there's a number of things that can be done to address that as those issues come up, or if they come up. And again, too, I wanted to thank all of the residents who came forward to support this change and advocate for it. There was quite a bit of messages I received from those people, particularly the church group. They came to meetings, they spoke publicly, and it was nice to see residents come forward and speak up publicly in support of that. That helped me that swayed my opinion on this issue, definitely. So I wanted to thank them for that.
Thank you.
I can appreciate the attempt for clarity and to expand housing possibilities, but I've experienced this in another community, and I didn't find it to do as much as the want of it, and it caused more problems in neighborhoods, especially with not the renting. I mean, our city already rents, according to a study, half the houses in Stevens Point are already rented. This will expand that, and the enforcement of it is a difficult thing. So in that regard, from the experience that I saw in another city, this isn't the way I feel we should proceed.
Okay. Anyone else? Great. Go to the audience. Any comments from the audience? Seeing and hearing none. The only thing I want to remind the council is, as the directors have told you, when we make a zoning change like this, it's much harder to go backwards. I do think it's a small enough step. I don't think it's going to have a whole lot of impact, but it's much more difficult to rescind that change than to take the smaller steps as you go forward. So I just want to make that clear. Once again, I know everybody's been informed. And at that point, we'll call the question. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. The nays will be the people who are opposed to it. And the clerk is going to call that roll. See how easy that was to say?
Morrow.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Shuda.
No.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Burr.
No.
Broderick.
Sorry. I didn't even hear it.
What did she say?
That was an aye.
Aye, okay. Keemer.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
9-2.
And 9-2.
9-2 by majority consent, that passes. Item number 7 is an ordinance amendment, a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend Chapter 23 of the zoning ordinance and of the revised municipal code. Said request amends Section 23.02 sub 1 sub E sub 4 pertaining to minimum lot size requirements for single and two-family dwellings in the R3 and two-family district. Does anybody need a recap of this? We've talked about this before. It's gone through committees. All right, we do have Andrea Olson.
I'm glad to see that the lot sizes are being reduced. However, I think that a bit more could be done here because this isn't enough. We have, okay, sorry. So right now, the R3 properties minimum lot size going down to 4,000 for single family, 4,000 for zero lot line, and 8,000 for two family. So right now, our mayor used to own a house across the street from him that was on about a 7,000 square foot lot. I'm not sure why He didn't repair anything, but it ended up being sold for $39,000 because it was in such disrepair. That one, I'm guessing, probably might have been one of the ones that couldn't have been fixed because somebody wanted to do something to it, but I don't know. But that is also one that, or the one next door to that, across the street from our mayor, is one that is online that actually states that they will only rent to students. I've provided the mayor with this information and additional information.
Andrea, what does this have to do with lot size?
The lot size, that one wouldn't be able to be rebuilt right now if it burnt down or anything.
Okay.
But also, you can't expand the footprint of it at all if they wanted to do anything to it. But the zero lot line ones over on 4th Street, each one is on a 3,000 square foot lot. It was due to it being in a planned development district zoning. Zero lot line houses are targeted towards people that do not want a lot of yard maintenance. So the structure takes up most of the lot. If lots have to now be bigger, then 4,000 square feet either means that the structure has to get bigger to limit the exterior maintenance there, or you have to change your target market for those houses. Currently, one is 1,900 square feet, and it's listed for $398,000. So, food for thought. The castle right now is on a 10,000 square foot lot. We're doing our duplexes down from that. That currently is a rooming house, and it's about 9,000 square feet, and the footprint is 3,000 square feet per floor. I have a 1,600 square foot house with a 1,300 square footprint on a 6,200 square foot lot that was built in as a duplex in 1880. This, I think, is the most common lot size, too, in R3. It had a 30 by 20 carriage house also, that's 900 square feet, which is about the smallest size that a house is in Stevens Point. There's a couple 700 square feet houses, but those are very rare. The 900 ones are too. So 2 houses fit easily on a 6,200 square foot lot with over 25% green space as required by the city. We are not allowed to build this now on our 6,000 square foot lots. I understand, and if you have a vacancy for over a year, you are forced to convert that house. If we're looking at density and changing our ordinance, why are we not looking inside of houses? Why are we not allowing our accessory units inside of houses? Why are we not allowing us to convert a basement, which means that you have to meet all the egress requirements for having a duplex within a house? Why can't you convert your single family? But it is related. It is related because we're doing minimal changes here. Why aren't we doing anything else? Because you're still left with an 8,000 square, you have to have an 8,000 square foot lot. What is this doing? Our zoning director, our zoning administrator said that if somebody wants to add a bathroom, that's when you're being told you can't do that and you have to convert your house back to single family. That's not always the case. You're getting a call saying, or a letter in the mail, you have to turn your duplex into single family. Well, when it works perfectly fine already, with almost 2 houses on that lot because that garage is as big as a house, and then you have the house as big as a house, but you're being told, we want to increase density, but you can't have that anymore, even though it is a duplex. Make it single family. That goes against a lot of the stuff that is out there. And if we're looking for housing options and more affordability, we should be looking at being allowed to convert, like not discouraging duplexes. Like, if you can't tell a house is a duplex, why are we having to convert it? But that is what is happening right now.
So, Andrea, is it an accurate summary to say that you're supportive of the ordinance change, but you think we could do more?
A lot more. And also, ADUs and ACUs are not included in this ordinance change at all. And they're completely left out. And if you're changing the square footage requirements, they weren't allowed unless you had 10,000 square feet a lot.
Thank you, Andrea.
But they aren't included there at all. So are they?
All right. The ordinance before you is the reduction in lot size. Does anybody need to go back to get again the reference? Okay. If you recall in our previous meetings, this would allow development on 8 sites, I believe it was, within the city. Is that correct, Director? 8 sites within the city that people could now build on. And that was the primary reason for this change. Thoughts, comments, or a motion?
I so move.
Thank you.
And I would second.
A second. Discussion?
I find it interesting that there is this thought that there is more to be done here. When we are considering this now, and I'm looking for...
Alderperson, I want to remind you that we're only talking about reducing the lot size. If you would like something new or in addition to this, contact the director, we'll get it on an agenda.
That was the question I was going to say, is like, if we, is there something there that like we're incrementally going towards at this point? Like, is there a recommendation that stands somewhere? Like, is it in a comp plan? Is it something? Because like, this is something
Actually, Alderperson, this comes from the Housing Task Force.
That's what I was going to say.
Making more stock available.
There's a couple of recommendations of reducing lot size, but what is that magic number, I guess, is what I'm saying. So like, I'm in support of what I've seen here, okay? But when I'm hearing, if there is more to be done, I would like to kind of understand what that kind of sense of more is, if there is to be more done here, and there's that opportunity in front of us tonight.
Absolutely. While there's not an opportunity to do it in front of you tonight, you can certainly work with the Economic Development Department and discuss that. If you want a further agenda item, we could put it on a plan commission to talk about what other options there are, but I think some of those were at least outlined fairly well in the Housing Task Force report. There was another one that's, the same thing I said earlier holds true here. The prudent course is to take small steps, because it's much more difficult to go backwards. If we change it to 400 and we decide, oh, that's a terrible idea, those that were using it would still be allowed to. So the baby steps, the small incremental steps, are equally as important here. Because again, it's difficult to go backwards. We're going to go to Morrow and then Christensen.
Again, I think what Andrew said, I think Andrew did bring up some good points. I think this is a good place to also start. And as the mayor said, I don't want to go too far, because I have been around. There's been some unintended things that have happened when we've moved too fast on certain things and it hasn't worked out.
Alder Christensen.
Same thoughts along the same line as both the mayor and Alder Morrow. I think this is similar to the last motion that we acted on, where it's an incremental change, and it'll give us an opportunity to assess the impact and then determine. Nothing that's not like this is the only change now that can happen in the next 5 years. So I'm supportive of this. I think it's a good first step, and then we'll have some sense of exactly what type of impact it does have, and what the next step, if a next step is necessary, what that would be.
Thank you. Any other comments? Comments from the audience? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Christensen.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Keemer.
Aye.
Broderick.
Aye.
Burr.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Shuda.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Morrow.
Aye.
And that is approved. Item number 8 is an ordinance amendment regarding section 13.09, the water service limits. I'm going to invite Director Lemke up here to kick us off, but there was a fair amount of discussion, and I think we're still very able to discuss this tonight, but I think the course of action is probably to send it to the Plan Commission. Even though we're not required to legally, I think it makes sense to have a little more public input and get the Plan Commission involved with it. But Director, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
And we do have a few speakers.
Okay, if I give a little history?
Sure.
Okay.
Please.
So Chapter 1309 specifically, water service limits. There's 3 different things in there, other than, because we're talking about outside the city boundary, right? It has Hull, it has Park Ridge, it has Whiting. Hull has some really weird, if you're within 175 feet of this center line on this date, you can, that whole thing. And that happens to be roads that had and have water main in them. So it's very clear. Part of that, I think, was actually a decree from the state because of a spill at the old Kickapoo, whereas now a Quick Trip, where they had contaminated wells, so we were told to allow it.
On 66, Stanley Street.
Yeah, so the ones that are allowed are actually on Maria, because that's where our water main is. We can't serve people that we don't have water main in front of, right? There's one in Whiting. It's the facility at the west end of Sherman. I don't know what that's called anymore. Attic Angel used to be a long time ago, the facility down there. And then Park Ridge is listed by address. And a lot of you know who have seen lots split and everything else, that's a terrible way to permanently refer to something as an address, because addresses change. You might have had a 20-acre lot that is now 40 lots, and that one address, how do we go back to that, right? And I bring that up because that's exactly how Angelo Court and Odessa Court got service, is because their parent parcel back in the 60s or whenever this was one of those listed in that ordinance, maybe like 10 Park Ridge Drive or something like that, right? And so when that was listed, they got service off of Main Street, Park Ridge Drive, however you want to, because our water mains were on Park Ridge Drive and still are. And so there's been a few things that have happened over the years where I've said, yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. So Odessa and Angelo Court, which are west of Green Avenue, just north of Silver Coach Restaurant, those there's a bunch of duplexes, Rao development. He built a lot of nice homes in there. Full water and sewer, right? Add to that, the entire village, every resident there has a water meter in their home because we meter their well to charge them sewer. Every place in Park Ridge has municipal sewer and has for 80 years. Okay. So to me, there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing, and this could happen at one meeting, but I don't know that it necessarily has to. It's really up to you guys. You'll read in Chapter 1309 there that the council has the authority to add more to this service area. So what we're dealing with right now is Park Ridge has a couple of grants out there that they're pursuing. They're in design. That will design water distribution for fire protection down two roads. It'd be the extension of Jefferson, which is Hillcrest in Park Ridge, and the extension of Green, which is Greenbrier in Park Ridge. Those two roads, not more. There's a phase 2 of this, which will happen someday, but it's just those extensions. So the question really comes up, is that reasonable? You know, they have an agreement with Stevens Point Fire Department for fire protection, so them saying we want a couple more hydrants seems not only reasonable, but very practical, so that our own fire department, whom they've got an agreement with, can better fight fires in their village. What happens then, from an infrastructure perspective, is the installation of water main is not cheap. And it's almost inappropriate to put it in the ground going, we're going to put a few hydrants on this and leave her be, right? We don't do that. You want as much use of that infrastructure as you can possibly squeeze out of it, so that the life of the infrastructure is meaningful and it has been paid for, and it's got another way to pay for its replacement. One kind of interesting thing about utilities is that we don't actually collect rates on assets until we replace them, because the first time they're put in, they're contributed. So there's always a developer, sometimes it's a city, so city general fund, right? That pays for new utilities to go in, and we take them on. They're dedicated to us, more or less. Sometimes it's a developer. Think Hunter Oaks subdivision, something like that. A developer put them in. We watched them go in. They were designed to our specification, built to our specification. We took them on after that. And we maintain those for 100 years, hopefully. Call it 75, And then after that is when technically the rates come in to say, we just had to pay for that to get replaced. We need to recover those rates. So in this case, it would be Park Ridge going, we want to put these water mains in, and us going kind of, well, from a utility perspective, going, well, you're going to buy a lot of homes. You're going to put in water services, right? And then saying, but we need to modify the ordinance if that happens, which you guys as a body have done before. Not this body. Last time it happened was for actually probably Angelo Court, and it wouldn't have been a modification to this ordinance because the parcel, the address that covered that was the address when it was adopted, like I said, 50 years ago. So before you is kind of either the chicken or the egg, right? Because we do need to bring something to Plan Commission. And that will be, here's the path of a water main. Its intended use is to be connected to our distribution system, which we have to accept it then. We can't have somebody who's not a water operator connect to our water system and then not have it be our water system, right? So it'll be, here's the main, here's the location, it'll have hydrants and water services on it. Hey, Plan Commission, does that sound good? Now, this is still going to take a long time. That one main going east down Hillcrest and north on Greenbrier with a handful of hydrants and a bunch of services, there's still going to be a triggering mechanism. They may choose to say, when your well goes, if you have city water adjacent, you have to connect to that instead of the well. You know, they may...
That's what the county ordinances currently say, right?
For septic.
Oh, septic.
Septic won't issue a septic permit if you have municipal wastewater available, right? And so there's a lot of things to be worked out there, and those are the things that I think need to be made clear, that they're in talks or done, or what the city's preference is with Plan Commission. This is, on the utility side, can this be worked into our service area? Because if we go to Plan Commission first, we're going to be doing the same thing. Well, okay, this looks good, but we need to adjust the ordinance to allow them to be served in Chapter 13, right? They could happen concurrently, and if that's your wishes, that's fine. We'll work to bring this back in a joint item. But I also don't think acting on this tonight and approving it tonight in any way lets the horse too far out of the barn, because we do have a Plan Commission item to bring forward to say, here's the water main that the city has been working with the village on as far as making sure it's designed to our spec and it will be built to our spec, so that if it's appropriate that we accept it, we know that we can. So that's...
Thank you.
That's what I got, yeah.
Liz?
Joel,
Liz, I need you to go to the lectern, and you are up next as a speaker anyway.
Thank you. Joel, I have a question on that. Are you saying that the grants that the village is applying for, that would be the source of the payment for these water mains?
I have one more thing to clarify. I know the dialogue is kind of weird. So, like I said, every time utilities go in the first time, they're paid for by somebody other than utility ratepayers. So, I can't speak entirely to how the village is paying for the infrastructure. I do know they have a couple grants they're leveraging to do it, but I know zero of our dollars are going to do it.
Zero of the utility dollars?
Or city dollars, as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah, but zero of the utility dollars for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Liz, you're on.
Okay, thanks. Liz McDonald, 1760 Strongs Avenue. This is deja vu all over again, right? This topic came up a year ago in January of 2024, and I found out about it by reading in the paper, or maybe it was online, probably Brandy's paper online. But anyway, so I came in that February and had some comments, and it's probably, my comments tonight are probably along those same lines. And thank you, Joel, for the clarification that you gave us regarding this issue. Now, if you look back at the minutes from last year's meeting, Alder Christensen moved and Alder Fischler seconded to pursue agreement for water service and approve the staff to negotiate the conditions between the city and Village of Park Ridge to be presented for further discussion. And I think that's a real key thing here, is that it was to be presented for further discussion. And I don't know, all I've seen, and not that I would know necessarily, but all I've seen is this ordinance, this proposed ordinance change that's on tonight's agenda. And I'm wondering if further discussions have been had, and if there have been any details worked out on it, and if you folks are all aware of what those details would be. I've always thought that the best method of, or the best reason to extend water service is if you're going to have annexation. And I think that in this instance, that probably would be the best. I understand that it gets to be a pretty complex issue when you're looking at dissolving a village, et cetera, et cetera. But I went back and looked at the ordinance myself because I wanted to get a little bit better understanding of what was involved here. And I looked at Section 13.09, water service limits. Reason for extended service. I'll bore you by reading this to you. In order to provide adequate fire protection for persons and property within the corporate limits of the city of Stevens Point, and to ensure protecting the public health and safety of the residents of the city without placing an undue financial burden upon the city taxpayers, and to effectively coordinate water department operations with other municipal public work activities, and for the purpose of conserving the available water supply. Conserving the available water supply. It is hereby determined that it is necessary to specifically limit the territory beyond the corporate limits of the city to which the municipal water utility holds itself out to service. And then it goes on, of course, to identify, as Joel mentioned, areas in Town of Hull, Village of Whiting, and Park Ridge. And this was a section that you're looking to replace, is the specific addresses that were listed in Park Ridge. It also mentions specifically water service in the form of a fire hydrant at the corner of Hillcrest and Sunset Avenues, which shall be installed for fire purposes and for no other purpose. Okay. You know, water is a limited asset, and really, I think we really need to be pushing the idea of no water service without annexation. I think that, I know that we would recover some funds by selling water to the people that would be along those mains, but I think we need to be looking at, if the water mains do go in, that part of the agreement would look at requiring hookup for the people adjacent to those mains within a particular time frame, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, something along those lines. I think right now my ask tonight is that, as a city council, if you would take the time to review what the staff recommendations are and what the negotiated conditions would be to extend it to any address within the village of Park Ridge. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. And thank you for your continued service on the Parks Commission. Appreciate that. Former Director of Community Development, John Gardner, actually former Solid Waste Director, too.
That's right. That's right.
Mr. Gardner, the floor is yours.
Don't start the timer yet. My understanding is old. Well, I know that. My understanding is that the reason there's a water main on East Maria and the people are connected to it had to do with negotiations with the town of Hull. The city wanted a water main down East Maria from the well field. The town of Hull said, sure, put it in our road, but condition, you have to allow a connection to it without annexation. That's the history that I understand for that. It wasn't Kickapoo gas station.
I believe it's some of it, yeah.
So at any rate, now you can start the timer.
Thank you.
Growth, as you've all been in budgeting, you know this. You know that if you don't have growth, you're not going to have an increase in budget. Growth is necessary. The only carrot you have got is annexation, because if you don't have sewer and water as limited for annexation, you're not going to have any more annexations. You're going to be like Milwaukee and be surrounded. You're going to be dead. So you need that condition of sewer and water with annexation, period. Now, you've got a difficult job tonight. You've got several items on the agenda tonight. It's been made more difficult because somebody brought this to your attention directly to council without putting it on a committee. They also brought it to you without any background information. So how are you going to, intenders only vote on something if you don't have background information? You had a meeting about it a year ago. As Liz said, the motion was bring it back with conditions. No information, a whole year from now, no conditions. What they're asking you to do is a blanket approval for the entire village of Park Ridge. No conditions, a blanket approval. This is not, as was said in the newspaper, It is not dealing with specifications, making sure the pipes are made to our specifications. This is a blanket approval for everybody in Park Ridge to have water. It's like when you buy a car. I want to buy that car. That's my decision. I'm buying that car. Well, now let's negotiate a price. Well, guess who's got the negotiation power then? The person selling it, right? You approve this tonight, Park Ridge has the negotiation power. You don't any longer. You want to maintain, you want to have conditions before you make a final deal. You are, if you do this, you are enabling a tax island in Park Ridge. Do you know that Park Ridge, a $233,000 house in Park Ridge, pays $3,200 in real estate taxes? That same house in Point would pay over $4,100. A $900 difference, 50% more in real estate taxes, simply because you live in Stevens Point. That's why it's illogical for them to want to annex to the city, but you are enabling a tax island. When your constituents come to you and say, why did you do this, you'll have to answer that question. Right now, median income in Park Ridge is $82,000 per household. Median income in Stevens Point is only $56,000, 50% more higher in Park Ridge than it is in Stevens Point. Point has a 6%, Park Ridge has a 6% poverty rate. Stevens Point's got a 16% poverty rate. And before you say that's because of the university, remember half the students that attend school in Stevens Point are eligible for free lunches. It is not just the university. There's a major difference, and you are, by doing this, you are enabling that community to exist. Just keep that in mind and explain that to your neighbors if this gets approved. Mr. Kanowski has sent you some information. I understand that he has expressed concerns about a precedent, this setting a precedent. I share the same concerns. I want to tell you that we had a similar situation with the town of Plover. If you remember right, for those of you who lived in town, west of I-39, north of HH. It's from McDill Pond to the interstate. That was all township. They had bad water. I worked out a deal with them to do a boundary adjustment. The city put sewer and water in the ground, paved new streets, assessed it back to the property owners, and gave each of those property owners 10 years to pay off the assessment. In the 11th year, they annexed. It gave them time to adjust to the, to put the utilities in. They got what they needed. They then annexed to the city. The city got new roads, new streets, new sewers, new water, everything. Everybody was reasonably happy. They took it to a vote. The township said, we want the people in that community to vote for it, and we'll honor what they voted for. And the majority of them voted in favor of it. Not everybody, but the majority did. That's an example of how you could approach this issue. It's already been done here. We were the first one in the state to do it, by the way. The question I would have that you have to ask yourself is, and I think Ryan brought the same issue up, is what are you going to do when City Stevens Point residents who don't have sewer and water, like on Pine Bluff and east of the subdivision on Torn, if they come to you and say, we want to detach, are you going to let them go? What happens when the people who have got, and the townships have got sewer and water in front of their house now, like Joe Street, like on 66, like on Green Avenue, come to you and say, we want the same deal that Park Ridge is. We want sewer and water without annexation. It's right in front of my house. I want to connect. I'll wrap it up. I would say that Mr. Lemke speaks from an infrastructure perspective. That's what he called it, an infrastructure efficiency perspective. That's not your point of view. Your point of view is what's good for the future of the city, not what's efficient from an engineer's point of view. And I would say this, again, if you approve this without conditions, the horse is out of the barn. You don't have negotiating authority any longer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chief Moody, because it was brought up, I'm going to ask you to come to the lectern and tell me when our current contract with the Village of Park Ridge for fire service, or fire protection service is up. And then what assurances, if any, do we have that we will continue to provide fire protection services beyond the existing contract?
Well, that's actually pretty interesting because I was just actually over at the Village Hall today, and our agreement is ending at the end of March of this year. We are currently just working with the Village of Park Ridge right now to look at a 5-year contract, moving us through the end of 2030. If the village decides to go with the Stevens Point Fire Department and move forward again. But right now, like I said, we just met this morning. I was over at the Village Hall, and the contract will be ending at the end of March. And the fire department actually came up with those dates because our other EMS and fire contracts all ended at the same time, and we wanted to get all of the contracts on the same cycle. And the Village of Park Ridge has worked with our department for many years on the other contracts, and they have always been signed for 5 years. I don't see this going any different. I see this being signed now for the next 5 years moving forward.
Okay, and just for clarification, there's no assurances that after that 5 years that the city of Stevens Point would continue to get that?
There's no assurance. Yeah, there's a negotiation aspect that we have to look at, and we would be looking at a 5-year contract in this round.
Thank you. And I only brought it up because it was mentioned about fire protection service.
Yep,
so,
not a problem.
City Attorney Beveridge, absolutely.
John, you said that deal that you worked out for water utilities, road repairs, and then annexation was between the city and the town of Plover, correct?
Yes.
So the statutes regarding annexation are quite a bit different for township property and village property. And that is the biggest complicating factor here. And I think it's the biggest element that makes the situation with Park Ridge unique. Essentially, properties that are part of an incorporated village can't annex to the city. It's not allowed under statute. The village could disincorporate, but then it becomes part of the town hall again. So it's a little more complicated than meets the eye. You also have the situation of, suppose that it did disincorporate, you did have water infrastructure in there. You have to worry about continuous borders too. So the property that is the first one right at the edge of the village that abuts the city, well, it could annex. But one that's 3 houses down, their well goes bad, they wouldn't be able to because they wouldn't have a continuous border with the city. So it gets to be a little bit complicated. You do start thinking about things like, well, could we strike a boundary agreement with a village? Well, I'm not sure if that's even a thing under the statutes. I'd have to look into it further. Might be. But what happens to that boundary agreement if the village ceases to be? Does it still apply to that same territory that is now part of the town of Hull? I'm not so sure it would. And obviously we've had a bit of an attempt here in the past to strike a boundary agreement with Hull. Ultimately that didn't work out. But the annexation questions are not quite so straightforward as some of the comments here might have led people to believe. Certainly if you guys would like me to drill down on that further, I can. Just not this instant off the top of my head. I wouldn't want to give you bad information.
One other thing, because I was going to make mention of that because I know we've talked about that at staff. So if the Village of Park Ridge did unincorporate, they would revert back to the town of Hull, which is what statute allows. From the town of Hull, they could then request annexation from the city, but the requirement would be, as the city attorney said, it has to be continuous. Could there, in theory, be an agreement that says the town of Hull will unincorporate, or, I'm sorry, Village of Park Ridge would unincorporate, go to the town of Hull, and then all would request annexation? You could probably do something like that, but I think that's challenging, and President Menzel would have his hands full on that one. So yeah, I think it's great that you brought that up because that is a complicating factor, but not making anything dead in the water.
So just one thing to remember too, I mean, this body has seen quite a few annexations over the years. Typically they are annexations of vacant land or property with like one house on it, or in rare occasions property with a a series of properties with more than one house and several residents, but even those are somewhat uncommon. And you get into the way that you have to have consent for annexation and the different methods for that. So we've usually had unanimous consent from all of the property owners, because usually it's one property owner and they're like, we want to annex this, as opposed to a whole village, which is going to be full of people with all kinds of different opinions. And I can guarantee you that, it would be statistically unlikely for there to be a consensus on that. I'll put it that way.
Thank you.
Guarantee.
Mr. Gardner, you said some additional comments?
I didn't finish because of the 3 minute. This is exactly the...
We want the discussion, as long as it's relevant, to continue.
This is exactly why my recommendation was going to be to send it to Plan Commission. This kind of conversation is very relevant. You don't have the information. This is the kind of back and forth you can do at Plan Commission. Do the homework, do the research necessary, and Plan Commission is probably the right venue to do it. So that was the last thing I was going to say, and I cut it off. I apologize.
Thank you. President Menzel, I know you're not signed up to speak, but is there anything you'd like to say on behalf of yourself or the village?
Thanks for having me. Steve Menzel, President, Village of Park Ridge. Actually, I don't disagree with looking at the details. We've actually been wanting to work on the details for quite a few months, and it is a little bit complicated. I think the project was described pretty well by Joe Lemke. The planning for this goes back 3 years, starting with a comprehensive plan, a strategic plan for the village, and a capital improvement plan, and also working with Chief Moody on fire protection. Actually, the water issue actually came out of fire protection when we signed the contract with the city for fire protection, a 3-year contract. One of the things that the chief asked for is a movement toward adding hydrants. So that's where the whole water thing started. And then when we got the 2 grants for improving the streets, one of which, Hillcrest, is Jefferson Street Extended, which is heavily used by a lot of people, including city residents. That's the first one that's being worked on. And that one was a state grant, and also the Ridgewood, which is Dixon Street Extended over to Greenbrier. So we got the 2 grants, and both of them, we figured if we're going to be tearing up streets, we're going to look at adding hydrants, water mains, and then the discussion about hooking up residents and having some type of sunset clause for residents to sign up or to hook up to the main. When I was talking to Director Lemke about that, I said, well, our main purpose is getting hydrants, and he said, well, it doesn't do much good to put a main in if you're not going to have hydrants, or if you're not going to have residents hooked up as well. So we're starting to look at, we're actually looking at a ordinance that would cover the requirements for hooking up. So I think Liz, mentioned about making sure that people hook up within a certain period of time. I think that's exactly what we're looking at. So those are the details that we want to work on, and I think the city wants to work on too. So I have no objection to working on the details for that.
Thank you. And just for clarification, President Menzel, have you talked about conditions for water service at any of your town meetings, village meetings rather?
Briefly, but we haven't had, there hasn't been enough back and forth yet on it. Conditions from the city. We know some of the conditions we'd want to have. We'd want to have people hooking up as soon as possible, because it just makes more sense. And we think when people's wells go out and you have to replace the well, they're going to want to hook up most likely. So we already have
best water in North America.
It is City of Wonderful Water. So we've already had one resident say on Hillcrest say that they want to hook up right away. So I think working on the details is important, and I totally agree with nailing down what the requirements would be.
Thank you. I appreciate the insight.
All right.
And yes, I use that road too when I go to Iverson Park, and I drive through some of the other Park Ridge roads, but I got to tell you, Mr. President, every village resident has to use city streets because you can't even get to a grocery store without driving out of city street.
Exactly, yeah.
You can't get out of the village.
Yeah, and Hillcrest needs a lot of work, believe me.
Yeah, you've got your work cut out for you.
We do.
Director Lemke, did you have some additional comments?
One more thing, yeah. Just so it doesn't appear otherwise, I think we're all after the same thing here. And I think that clarifying through the service limits, Ordinance 1309, that we're identifying Park Ridge as eligible for water service doesn't mean they can in any way control our system and determine where to hook up. What it means is we're acknowledging how to handle those items that are going to come forward to Plan Commission. Right? I don't know that we should negotiate an open session here, but I actually think it gives the city a very strong hand in how this goes forward. And not only that, because we have that strong hand, we can say, as they're already doing, here's our spec, here's what we would expect to go in. Not only that, but here's what our road spec looks like, right? Here's what we'd expect to go in to actually protect the city in the future should any annexation happen. Say it's 30 years from now. Well, then we'll know that there were 30 years worth of city spec roads built. All right, so those items that Mr. Gardner is referring to that we talked about those are coming because we need to work on them. We're going to try to schedule everything, where did Moody go, to end at the same time. We'd like to take all of our weird agreements, the ordinance language. I mean, there may be reference of horseshoes in there where there should be tires now, right? I mean, that's how these things go, right? There's some stuff in there that is actually pretty irrelevant. This was a change to set course for, now here's how we need to handle the agreements between us, rewriting the ones we have. We're not going to need that single hydrant mention if the whole village is able to install and use water. We do not have a supply issue. This would be a rounding error in our pumpage. So none of that, we stand ready to serve it. It's how do we serve it, community to community. That is the more politically charged part. I get that, and I am more infrastructure focused. But if we're saying the infrastructure can be there, well, then we can set out and start working on these agreements in my mind. And I know the action said, bring it forward. We could do it at the same meeting. We can. But I think knowing that there's an understanding that right now we're dealing with something we weren't really, there's other agreements in place. There's fire protection. I suppose that was there. But trying to clock them all at the same time, knowing as we're working on them that plans can be worked out for the whole village if it ever needs it, but right now it's a very small percentage. Knowing that makes the agreements we're going to write more informed, I think, and it makes them more complete in a way. But we can do them concurrently too. Doesn't matter.
Director, I've got a couple of questions. I apologize for putting you on the spot, but we're discussing it.
Here's the spot.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
We're in the planning phase of this now, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that I think it makes the most sense to get the Plan Commission involved. The city attorney will tell you we're not legally obligated to do that, but because we're in the planning phase and the Plan Commission is charged with a number of things, statutorily and otherwise, that refer to planning, I think it's at least professional courtesy to get them on board and have it discussed, because you are in the planning phase. The next question would be, hypothetically, if this passes tonight, and the infrastructure goes in, and a resident along that line, Hillcrest, let's say, decides that they want to connect to water, who approves that?
They have to request service from us, everybody on our system.
Say us, you mean the utility?
Utilities, the city of Stevens Point.
Council wouldn't have a say in it going forward for that connection, would it?
No, but it wouldn't be put in unless it were going to be allowed, right?
If we pass the ordinance as presented tonight,
yeah,
would council have any say in who connects to that water service?
By
and
way
under
of
what conditions?
By way of upcoming agreements first. So we're saying Park Ridge is eligible for service, but that isn't the magic wand that makes mains go in, right? There's engineers involved. It's our system. We get involved. We say here's how it's got to get built, and knowing that it's allowed, And whatever agreements would happen between now and when construction happens, i.e., you will build it to our spec, as we've already discussed. You're going to build roads to our spec. You're going to have a triggering mechanism that determines when people come on. Other than that, they can connect whenever they want, ahead of that, optionally, but it won't be after this event. All those things are yet to come.
But who's required, who's involved in making those determinations? We certainly don't have any say in how they get their road, how they build the road out.
No, you do, because of this. We're not going to accept water main.
You get to say that. As a utility director.
Yeah, but it's a broader public work thing, right? This is where all of the things come together. So what Gardner's talking about from a negotiation perspective. Okay. If you want the utilities in place, we're going to work with the other entities of the city to say, what else do we need, right? And what we need is to know that that water main exists under a road that's capable of carrying a fire truck.
Fire truck, that'd be helpful, yes.
And also one that if ever we need to take it over, that we have confidence in the fact that it was built well. Yeah, that is all to come.
Okay, and that's kind of what I was getting at.
And those agreements are never seen those are always Plan Commission.
It certainly makes sense that everybody get at the table, because if the council and or the utility wants to put conditions on that the village isn't comfortable with, those should be done sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's best going back through Plan Commission at least once.
Yeah.
To see where we go with this. And President Menzel, I know we're going to have you involved and your village through the whole process. So it's not easy. Chief, I saw you stand up. Chief Moody, did you have something additional to say, or were you just stretching the legs?
Sometimes I wish I was just stretching the legs. By the way, 82,000 pounds is what we need for our fire apparatus to roll down that road.
We talked about this when we first started the contract.
Yeah, so
some of the roads we would actually cause more damage on.
Yeah, 82,000 pounds. But anyways, the other thing is when we talk about that infrastructure and building this out, we talk about who's all involved. When it comes to those fire hydrants, it's not Chief Moody just selecting where we would like a hydrant or on what corner or what makes sense. We statutorily are required, when we do infrastructure work within any of these areas, are required to meet certain standards. So while I may have a say on, okay, let's move it 300 or 400, usually a city block is 400 to 450 feet. I can move it one way or the other a little bit, but statutorily they're gonna dictate when we have this construction and we go through all this with water and utilities where those hydrants are going to be located, and we may be able to adjust them a little bit for service purposes, but again, those things are out there to be upheld as well. So all these things are going to play into this process.
Thank you, Chief. Okay. Any more discussion we want to happen tonight? Thank you, John, for being patient. We are far different than the county board. Alder Guthrie?
I vaguely remember the meeting that Liz referenced. It was before I was elected and sat on council, but I do recall vaguely the charge to staff to come back with a comprehensive development vision so that we could vote on micro items in line with that vision. And perhaps I'm missing it, but I don't believe that council has seen sort of a comprehensive vision of our interfacing with surrounding municipalities and how we want to structure utilities, budget for, and plan our growth according to that vision. And so this feels a little cart before the horse based on, again, that I haven't gone back and read the meeting. So if anyone moves to approve this tonight, I'll be voting against it because I haven't yet, and forgive me if I'm missing it, seen that comprehensive vision either in closed session or otherwise.
Thank you. And I would recommend a motion to send it to Plan Commission at their next available meeting.
You had asked for discussion, so I provided my discussion.
No, absolutely. Yes. But yeah, when asked for what my thought was, and I know I wasn't, but I mentioned that at the beginning, that I think Plan Commission is another good start. or continuation of this. Alder Morrow and then Alder Christensen.
Well, Council, I know, I think going back to Planning Commission would be a really good idea, because I know in the past this body's been accused of trying to annex areas, and even though that hasn't always been the plan, that has been something that this body has been accused of in the past. And in regard to Park Ridge as well, I mean, they have had city wastewater for 80 years. So it's not like this is something that they're not hooking up to everything. They all have meters anyway. And everybody that is on the current lines, from what Joel had said in the past, is already hooked up. And I know Park Ridge has its own unique personality, its own culture, and everything else. So, I mean, and as our attorney said, I think it's highly unlikely that they're all going to vote to be part of Point. But I think it would be good to go back to. I think it would be good to go back to planning so that it's not seen as us trying to do a land grab, which I know Hull is accused of doing in the past.
Thank you. Alder Christensen.
I think this, again, comes under the heading where it's probably more important to make a good, comprehensive decision than a quick one. I think and I'm the one who made the motion for discussion a year ago, that there's still some more items to be looked at. It is a complicated issue, as a number of individuals have addressed. I think potential for boundary agreements, and it may be between, because of the complexity of all of it, I think it'll take some time, but I think it's time worth taking. And I think we have to make sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed and everybody's well served. Even as far as when somebody has to hook up to it, when in my past life when I was on city council up in Washburn over 20 years ago, we got a $5.6 million grant for a $12 million water and sewer project. And one of the requirements for accepting that grant was that as soon as the line went by, they had to hook up, whether they had a working well or not. Now, I'm not sure all what grants and stuff they're going to be receiving, but it may be that there are going to be conditions that we haven't even thought of, that we're not even imposing yet. I think there's definite potential, but I think there's a lot of aspects that have to have a good look at, and I think we would be well served sending it to Planning Commission and having that discussion started.
Is that a motion?
I would move to send this to Planning Commission to work with staff and council and in collaboration with the village so we can move this forward in a thoughtful manner.
Thank you. And that would be at their next available meeting?
Absolutely.
The reason I say that is because some of them require a 2-week publication, right. And I don't know where that falls because we're meeting a day later than we normally would.
I had thought of that as well.
Thank you. The motion is to send it back to Plan Commission at their next available meeting. Is there a second?
I second.
Wow, where'd that go?
I think
she's quick.
Let's give the second to Steinmetz.
Sure.
Even though there were 3 or 4 others.
That's fine.
And before we go into our discussion, Director Lemke raised his hand.
Well, we're looking for.
I need you got to come up here though, otherwise people can't hear. Yeah. Sorry. If it was a word or 2 or 3, I could probably restate that, but it sounds like it's more than that.
I'm just the details behind the things that would happen from here on. I gotta think aren't going to be ready for the next.
Right.
And I don't think all the specific details in minutia have to be, but I think general concepts of how we're moving forward. Because I think there's still a lot of those are lacking.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Good.
How about if we do a friendly amendment there to next available meeting or when it's ready?
Yeah, at the next available.
And I don't know when that's going to be either. I'm looking at the director and he's looking at his computer, so I don't know if he's looking things up for deadlines or not. So we had some people that want to speak over here? No? No speaking? Good. Any comments from the audience? Okay. The motion is to refer back to Plan Commission at their next available meeting or when they are ready. And I got a thumbs up from the director. That's good. If you're in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no, and the clerk will call that roll.
Morrow.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Shuda.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Broderick.
Aye.
Keemer.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
And that is approved. Item number 9 is an ordinance amendment, section 15.02, Aldermatic District Boundaries. We had talked about this before. Does anybody need a refresher there?
Please.
Oh, clerk, I'm going to give that to you.
Sure. We had a couple of annexations, so we're just adding those into the ordinance, so it's most up to date.
I apologize. Those streets weren't highlighted and it got pretty dense. Thank you for the explanation.
It gets confusing too, especially with the parking ordinances, because it's all spelled out. There's no maps. So it's like 50 feet of the next 25 feet of the blah, blah, blah.
Over by the oak tree.
The oak tree. All right. Do we have a motion? I'm sorry, Keemer?
I'll motion to approve, but I guess I was just curious, besides, if it was just 7 that was impacted, or if there's other districts impacted.
7 and 11.
7 and 11, thanks. I'll
Okay.
move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, who said that? Okay, Broderick?
Broderick.
Any discussion? Comments from the audience? Hearing and seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Christensen.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Keemer.
Aye.
Broderick.
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Shuda.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Morrow.
Aye.
And that's approved. Item number 10 is an ordinance amendment to approve the ordinance for Chapter 9, which is traffic and vehicles, subsection 9.05 with parking, 9.06 with signs, and 9.12 that relates to bicycle lanes and motor bicycles. These were discussed at committees, so
I will move approval.
thank you.
Second.
Spur. I think that was right. Okay. Seems I always turn my head and then someone over here says something. Someone over here says something. Discussion. Comments from the audience. Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call that roll.
Morrow.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Shuda.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Bird.
Aye.
Broderick.
Aye.
Keemer.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
And that is approved. Item number 11 is an ordinance amendment to approve the ordinance amendment to section 4.18 of the revised municipal code related to the referendum requirement for transportation projects. I think everybody here is aware of this. This is the $1 million requirement that there was a public referendum. We do have 2 people who wish to speak. We'll start with Craig Tesh.
Craig Tesh, 1100 Frontenac Point. At the last Finance Committee meeting, I noticed that Mr. Wiesa said that the original referendum here was that we're talking about was about Business 51 project. But to me, that's what this change looks to us to be about. Yes, I thought it should have been set at a higher limit, but it got the council's attention when nothing else would. Sure, the Business 51 project is slated to cost close to $50 million, but we were also told that it would be done in 3 sections. So each section would cost just under a third of that. And it's a good bet that each of these sections would cost under the $20 million limit you're proposing. So I'm asking the council to set an amount somewhere between $5 and $10 million, just above where your other projects that now are being inhibited would now be accepted without having to go through the referendum. But at the same time, it would leave projects of this magnitude for people to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Tesh. And you are correct. The estimates for each segment of Business 51 are currently under $20 million. Andrea Olson.
I I'm for this change because it still is extremely respectful of the people that put in a lot of time to get that referendum done and okayed, and we have tested this out, and council could have decided to get rid of this altogether, but you haven't. You've decided to be respectful and increase the limit on it. Because what about something like Park Ridge? Are you going to get all the point people to okay a streets improvement project that we're going to have to pay for Park Ridge if it ends up being point having to pay for it somehow? Since I didn't completely understand what was being talked about before, but if something was happening like that, like how are you going to get people to vote yes on that? So, but still, I like the $20 million. I understand his $10 million if that's a good amount, but we did the research probably to see how many projects fall in that, and it's a good amount. So I'm glad that you didn't get rid of it completely, did a little bit. I can see something like this happening for TIF projects in the future too, since we need some more visibility with that too, and transparency.
Thank you. Just for clarification, there's no intention of the city of Stevens Point paying for roads in Park Ridge. Or anywhere else for that matter that is not the city of Stevens Point. I don't want to get that rumor started. I can tell you one of the reasons that we chose, you're seeing this change in front of you, is because we did feel that the dollar amount was overly restrictive. Another thing to bring up is that if the council chose to remove this ordinance, another public referendum, binding referendum through direct legislation would be possible. Direct legislation rules say that you cannot change an existing ordinance. If you were to remove it, direct legislation could reestablish a $1 million threshold. So there was some discussion in that regard. And I just wanted to make sure council was fully aware of that. That being said, thoughts, comments, or a motion?
I would move changing the dollar amount to 15 million.
Just the dollar amount?
Just the, yep. The rest of the changes to be as have been presented. My thought to that, I think 15 will be sufficient to accomplish what we need to accomplish, but it'll move a little sooner in a time frame for the council to have to take another look at things at some point down in the future. It kind of goes back right along with earlier discussions. You make changes and then you have a chance to see the impact. 15 million, I think, will accomplish everything we need to accomplish now, but will also bring it back into focus a little bit sooner. So that would be my motion.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Seconded by Keemer. Discussion now only on the amendment. Yes.
I would welcome comment by Director Badoon about when we would anticipate needing to go to referendum at that $15 million mark, thinking about timing of scheduling a referendum and projects that we are already out for bid with. I just want a better understanding of how that materially impacts your ability to do your work.
Director?
At this time, it would not impact anything we've got going on at the moment, 15 million.
This season?
Correct.
When do you anticipate needing to go to referendum to approve, given cost of material and labor changes and that price point?
That's difficult to say until we truly get all of our projects together, but not in the foreseeable next few years, that I would say.
That's a squirm.
I was going to say there.
Yeah, the project sizes vary even as, you know.
It's a hard question. Is this punting something for a year, or is this punting something for 5 years would serve this council well? And just like you, I don't know what the cost of concrete will do in a year.
I would say that I'm fairly comfortable that we have several years to go. And part of that is also the change in the language, being very clear about a bidded project, as well as without utilities. Because when we subtract that, because I think the biggest, largest one I think we've had more recently was I think, around 8 million, but that included everything, including utilities. So, comparative. So
That's helpful.
next few years, unless we have another huge spike that we had just shortly after COVID, where things jumped up 30%, thinking that things are more stable now for the next few years, I would think that we would be fine for a few years.
Thank you.
Director, another more direct question?
Yes.
How would this affect Business 51?
At this point in time, I'm not sure that even that as a bidded project would meet that threshold.
Okay, so you feel that if we change the wording of the ordinance to exclude utilities and set a $15 million threshold, that Business 51's redesign could continue as the council has approved?
I believe it would, yes.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the motion to amend?
Just clarification, what was the motion?
The motion is to change the dollar amount from 20 million to 15 million.
Okay, thank you.
Let's say in 5 years, the price of concrete or asphalt becomes astronomical. Can we, at that point, amend this ordinance again?
You can change any ordinance through the proper process at any time.
Because the cost and the planning to go to referendum is not insignificant as well. So my only concern would be that it's too low, but it sounds like we're good for the foreseeable future.
Including Business 51.
Since none of us have a crystal ball.
Right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good, because I guess with that, just trying to think, as you're asking the questions, I'm thinking about really what our capital improvements plan kind of looks like now, like what you have seen in the budget for those future years. I guess within there, whether 15, $20 million, I think, it would help us get through for at least several years on any of the general reconstruction stuff that we have at the moment, and truly would be the extraordinary type things. For example, someone was just joking with me about they wanted an overpass on Highway 66 over the railroad tracks. Something that clearly is going to be a very expensive project to do. But short of some of those sorts of things, yeah, we could still do like the Badger Avenue, extension, the Maria Drive Walker that we did this year. Those foreseeable future things, I think, would get several years before inflation would catch up to us for that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes.
Comments?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
I think that we would be kind of close. The way that inflation is going and the way costs have also gone up. I think we would be boxing ourselves in, and I don't think this would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tesh, come on up to the lectern. While you're doing that, I want to point out, too, that as the director just told you, even reducing it to $15 million, Business 51 would move ahead as the council has authorized already.
As Director Badoon squirmed. But just kind of...
I'm not going to say that. Mr. Tesh.
A couple things. I guess, first of all, the whole reason that I was here is because I wanted that particular project or any other project of that magnitude to still be something that where the people themselves would decide instead of, just going through per se as it is now. The other thing that was pointed out too is that you're talking about situations where in the future those prices may go up, but you can increase it or cola it or whatever with inflation, so that as the inflation goes up or prices goes up for whatever that you're looking at, you can set some kind of an index and make sure that that goes up in accordance with it, so that you can be set up for future in that regard. But by the same token, I think that something like the Business 51 project is something, it's more than just the money. It's a lot of things to a lot of people, and that's why I'm bringing this up. And going down to $15 million is, you're missing the whole point that why I was here, is that I think that I see where many of the projects that you have would be ones that would be affected by $1 million. although I saw was just, I think it was 14 out of 27, so that's just 1.5 projects or less than 1.5 projects a year. But by the same token, I just feel like something that is right along those lines, that there's some way that those projects should be put before the people. Because after all, they're the ones paying for it.
Thank you. For clarification, I'd like to point out that all of these projects are vetted through public meetings. Every member of the public and those even outside the city have an opportunity to chime in on every project that we do through those public meetings, through the budget process. And that's surprising because the budget for 2025 was set months ago, and the number of people that showed up to say anything about anything on the budget, I can count with less than one finger. Zero people showed up to say anything about it. So you have that opportunity. Each and every resident of the city of Stevens Point has an opportunity to get involved, and they have a vote too. Every April, there's an election. So anyone who wants to be participatory can certainly have more than ample opportunity. The motion before you is to amend the ordinance from $20 million to $15 million. Is there any further discussion on that?
Amend the proposed ordinance inclusive of the other language.
Right. The only amendment is changing $20 million to $15 million.
Of the proposed
Of
changes.
the proposed changes, yes.
Thank you.
Yep, the proposed amendment, the proposed ordinance change has been amended. We're only voting on the amendment. I just need to be clear on that. Sometimes it gets confusing. No further discussion? I think we can do a voice vote on that, can't we? Or do you want to do a roll?
Do a roll.
Let's do a roll call vote. If you're in favor of changing the dollar amount in the proposed amendment ordinance, amended ordinance, from 20 to 15 million, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no. Clerk, please call that roll.
Christensen.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Sure.
Keemer.
Aye.
Broderick.
No.
Burr.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Shuda.
No.
Lang.
No.
Boozy.
Aye.
Morrow.
No.
Oops.
7-4, the amendment passes. Now, the original proposal as amended. Motion?
I will make a motion to approve the proposal as amended. I think there was a lot of time and effort put in by staff and by the mayor working with the staff to come up with this proposal. I do think with that modification, I think it would be a good one to move forward. So I would move approval of the Weasel proposal.
Thank you. The motion is to approve the ordinance amendment as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion there.
I had a couple residents reach out about this, and after hearing that at committee that some people might interpret it as a kick in the pants, I was pleasantly surprised to hear that everyone who reached out to me was in favor of this change. It just seems practical with the price of things going up. So few projects are under $1 million. I was initially hesitant about the change from 20 to 15, but after hearing from the director that that's not going to be an issue for the foreseeable future, I'm okay with this.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments from the audience? Okay, seeing and hearing none. If you're in favor, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no, and the clerk will call that roll.
Morrow.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Shuda.
No.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Burr.
Aye.
Broderick. Aye. Keemer.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Christensen.
Aye.
And that is approved. Item number 12 is a resolution authorizing the City of Stevens Point to submit a Great Lakes Environmental Justice Thriving Communities grant-making program application. We've talked about this one too. Does anybody need a refresher? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Seconded by Lang. Discussion? Those from the audience?
I'll make a comment. This is something that I would say I'd love to see come before us. This is one of these no-match grants that we need to be pursuing as a city to fund our operations, and I'd just like to say great work to you guys in that department. I look forward to supporting this.
It is quite amazing that we get as many grants as we do in spite of last week's presentation.
I knew that was coming.
All right. Any other discussion? In all seriousness, our directors do a fabulous job of not only finding efficiencies, but applying for each and every grant that we are even remotely eligible for. They do a great job with that, and we don't get a lot of them, but we do get some. And we're going to cross our fingers on this one. If you're in favor, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no, and the clerk will call that roll.
Christensen.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Keemer.
Aye.
Broderick. Aye. Burr.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Shuda.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Morrow.
Aye.
And that is approved. Item number 13, Liz, I apologize. Item 13 isn't really set for discussion, and I didn't see that you had it listed as a speaking point. I would have asked you to speak on item number 4 as well. If there's no objection to the council, because Liz signed up for item number 13 out of professional courtesy and your service to the city, I would ask the council's permission to allow her comments prior to going into closed session.
We'll pretend like it's item 4.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Liz, go ahead.
4B.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4B, thank you very much. Yeah, I happened to notice what item 13 was about, the deliberation of potential sites for the next steps for the relocation of the City Hall and property negotiations. So, hey, folks, I've been on the park board for a long time, and I remember when the bank building went in, the Chase Bank building, it's now called, I think it went in there because it was Anchor Bank or Marine Bank or whatever it was called at the time, and they wanted to be on the waterfront. Well, it's a prime site in the city, which many people have commented on and noticed, but I still get questions from people asking, why is that bank in park property? And I know that there have been in some of the comprehensive plans for city development. The folks in development always see every space of open land as potential for development and for housing. And I think that's what the Chase Bank has been looked at as a potential place for development and for more housing. But our parks can't really stand any more density of population down there. We already have between Berkshire and Northside Yards and the former Lullaby building, plus all the apartments above all the buildings downtown, we have tremendous pressure on all of our downtown parks. So I think, obviously, that's not going to get torn down and not used for anything. It's going to be developed, and if it's developed by anybody, I think it should be developed by the city for the new city hall. I think it would be a real jewel in the crown of the city, and I think our employees deserve a great place to work and not get shunted around in somebody's basement or something just because it's cheaper. So I think if it's a possibility, if you can please consider that property for City Hall, I'd appreciate it. And I'm sure that other people would too. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Item number 13 is entering into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85 sub 1 sub E and 19.85 sub 1 sub G for deliberating and negotiating the purchase of public properties, yada, 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 et cetera, for 2 items. 1, the deliberation for potential sites and the next steps for relocation of City Hall. And B, property negotiations for the purpose of relocating City Hall. I would need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Morrow. Any discussion? If not, I need a roll call vote. Clerk?
Morrow.
Aye.
Boozy.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Shuda.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Steinmetz.
Aye.
Burr.
Aye.
Broderick.
Aye.
Hemer.
Aye.
Guthrie.
Aye.
Christensen.
And that is approved. We will not be returning into open session. I need you to shut down all the power so there's no chance of us streaming, please.
I will take one now.